I left with practically nothing but my father's old beetle. During Chinese New Year, Lucas, their son I'd raised for 22 years, staggered drunk and pointed a finger at my nose after I refused to buy him a luxury watch. "You're not my real mom. Who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" As I stared at his contorted face, I secretly tucked away the toothbrush he'd left behind. A week later, the report from the Munich Forensic Identification Center arrived. Their words, "exclusion of biological parentage," hit me like a slap across the face. Vienna's winter mist hung like wet gauze soaked in ash, clinging lingeringly to the windowsills of the white apartment by the Danube. The heating indoors blazed, yet it couldn't chase away the cold from Elena Hoffman's fingertips. The nib of her fountain pen scratched across the last item of the divorce agreement. The rustling sound, like a slow cut, severed everything held together by 22 years of time. To keep her promise of not hurting the children, she left with practically nothing. She gave up her shares in the mechanical factory her father had left in the suburbs, this white apartment that once symbolized home, and all her hard-earned assets. Everything went to her two sons, 21-year-old Lucas and 11-year-old Noah. All she took was her father's old beetle, with a dried lavender sachet hanging from the rearview mirror. Its scent had faded almost completely, yet it became her only anchor. The sweet aroma of baked apple pie wafted warmly through the hallway of her mother Helena's old town apartment. The elderly woman silently took Eleanor's suitcase and handed her a steaming cup of mulled cinnamon wine. "Eat something, Ellie," Helena said softly, using her childhood nickname. "The boys, they'll understand someday." Elena cut into the golden pie crust, but the first bite felt as dry and gritty as swallowing shards of glass. Her left hand unconsciously brushed the faint white mark on her ring finger, left by decades of wearing a wedding band. The ring itself pressed coldly against her coat pocket, like a tiny, hardened fossil of betrayal. Outside the window, the Danube flowed silently beneath the mist, reflecting no trace of starlight. The first Chinese New Year after the divorce felt as tense as a strung bow. Lucas stumbled onto the sofa reeking of cold air and expensive cologne, his soles leaving mud stains on the freshly laundered couch cover. Noah had gone to stay with his cousin Isabella for the weekend, that shrewd businesswoman who was always so eager to help. At the dining table, Helena tried desperately to liven the mood, constantly piling food onto her grandson's plate. Lucas responded distractedly, his eyes darting everywhere except to Eleanor's face. Finally, he put down his knife and fork, speaking as if his request were a given. "Mom, I need a new laptop next month, €3,000. And a watch, too. All my classmates have one." Eleanor's grip on her fork tightened as she tried to explain the factory's cash flow troubles, suggesting a more affordable option. Lucas's face darkened instantly, his cheeks flushed with alcohol. "School? Always school. Marcus just buys whatever I want. You don't get it. You've never really cared about what I want." The argument escalated abruptly. Years of pent-up resentment and controlling anger erupted into sharp, bitter accusations. Elena trembled all over, her stomach clenched as if by a cold hand. Suddenly, Lucas shot to his feet, waving his arms and shouting, "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? You're not my real mom." The words hung in the air, freezing everyone. A spoon clattered into a plate. Eleanor's ears rang, and a coldness like an ice pick pierced from the top of her head to the soles of her feet. Lucas's eyes flickered with panic for a moment, then hardened into reckless defiance. He grabbed his coat and stormed out the door. The slam of the door shook the old wall clock. In the silence, only the cloying sweetness of the pie and the greasiness of the meal lingered. Those venomous words echoed wildly in her mind. The next day, Lucas returned to fetch his game console. Hiding in the kitchen, Elena heard the rustle of his searching and his ragged breathing. Through the crack in the door, she saw him bending to tie his shoelaces, his cap pulled low to hide his face. After he left, she found herself wandering into the guest room, where the air still smelled of his unfamiliar, spicy cologne. On the bathroom counter lay a single old blue toothbrush. Without hesitation, she wrapped it in a tissue, as if it were a dangerous explosive or the only key to the truth. Her fingertips brushed the slightly rough bristles, She took a deep breath and placed it in the camphorwood box on her desk. That box had once held baby teeth, first locks of hair, and a crayon drawing of the family. Now, beside those proofs of happiness, lay a bomb that could detonate her entire life. The letter from the Munich Forensic Identification Center arrived at the factory office on a sweltering afternoon. Elena was checking equipment parameters, but the roar of their machines couldn't drown out the growing unease in her chest. When the thin envelope landed on her desk, her heart skipped a beat. Time seemed to thicken and slow. The tear of the letter open slicing through the envelope sounded piercing. She pulled out the report, and her eyes locked immediately on the line, exclusion of biological parentage. The words burned into her retinas like a red-hot iron. The edge of the paper was sharp, her trembling fingertips grazed it, and a bead of blood dropped precisely onto the cold word, exclusion. The contrast between the warm liquid and the icy conclusion was searing. 22 years of life suddenly lost all meaning, reduced to an absurd joke. She clung to the desk to steady herself, the roar outside sounding like mocking funeral music. A deeper chill followed. When her lawyer retrieved Noah's birth certificate, he noticed discrepancies. The signature in the mother field was strange and stiff. Friedrich Weiss, a retired forensic examiner and a close friend of Eleanor's father, studied it carefully with a magnifying glass before delivering the grim verdict: "This is not your handwriting. It closely matches Isabella's style." The name struck like lightning, clearing the fog. Those overly eager acts of care, the unfamiliar gardenia scent on Marcus, the subtle provocations, the fragments pieced together into a terrifying picture. The lawyer provided another detail: Isabella had gifted a prime downtown apartment to 10-year-old Noah the previous year. An insider said, "Who gives such an expensive gift for no reason, unless they are the real parent?" The words crushed Eleanor's heart. She stumbled to the window, gazing at the lush oak tree her father had planted. She remembered those summer evenings, Marcus holding Lucas and pointing at the tree: "Someday, Daddy's factory will all be yours." The sun was bright, but she shivered so hard her teeth chattered. The paternity report and the handwriting analysis joined the toothbrush in the camphorwood box, now a display case of cold, silent lies. Rumors spread like ice water seeping into cracks. The factory workers looked at her with cautious sympathy. It was then that Sebastian Miller stepped into her life. At a gallery opening, she stood apart from the glitz in a dark suit, a lavender brooch pinned to her collar, like she was trapped behind a glass dome. The curator noticed her detachment and the brooch's Bauhaus aesthetic, and struck up a conversation about mechanical beauty. They talked about old architecture, industrial design, and even the factory's machine tools, which he described as having a rhythmic, living quality. For the first time in ages, she forgot her troubles, lost in the rare joy of intellectual connection. He became a window in her grey life, taking her for walks along the Danube to watch the golden sunset, leading her to visit old craftsmen's workshops in narrow alleys. He reminded her that life held more than scheming, it held beauty and devotion. But this tiny ray of warmth became ammunition for Lucas. A photo of Sebastian handing her documents, actually old factory records, while she listened intently, was taken out of context and posted online: "Found a new lover to back you up already. You definitely faked that toothbrush. You just want to team up and steal everything from me and my brother." Labels like homewrecker and conspiracy coiled like venomous vines, and online chatter exploded. Elena was peeling an apple when she saw the posts. The accusations felt like cold arrows piercing her. Her knife slipped, cutting her finger. The sharp, tiny pain mingled with overwhelming absurdity and humiliation. Sebastian found her staring into the night and silently handed her a cup of hot cocoa. Lies always bear their fangs because they are afraid of the truth. Instead of pulling away, he stood by her more firmly, helping organize evidence, consulting lawyers, but being extra careful to avoid being alone with her. He always kept a USB drive in his pocket, with backups of all the proof, and an old photo of himself from when he'd been betrayed years earlier, a reminder for himself, and a token of his empathy for her pain. Elena stopped staying silent. She asked Isabella to meet at their usual cafe. Her well-groomed cousin, dressed in red, smiled and asked if Noah had been misbehaving. Eleanor slid a copy of the handwriting analysis across the table. Isabella's smile froze instantly. Her eyelashes fluttered, and her hand drifted to the Mont Blanc pen in her pocket, a gift from Marcus. What's this? Are you accusing your own family just because you're upset about the divorce? Her voice rose, feigning outrage. Marcus was right. You're impossible. She played the victim, lashing out with anger. Eleanor's heart sank. This familiar face had never looked so ugly. What about the apartment you gave Noah? Who's that generous unless they're the real parent? Isabella sprang up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, spilling her coffee. You've been investigating me. Is it a crime to spoil Noah with a gift? You're just jealous. Bitter. Framing me for no reason. Her shrill voice drew stares. Eleanor watched her performance in silence, letting the truth speak for itself. Meanwhile, Lucas refused for times to take a second paternity test. His unusual resistance only deepened suspicions. Online opinions split. Then Helena brought new news. She'd kept trying to smooth things over, baking apple pies and calling to check on him. While tidying Lucas's old jacket, she'd found a crumpled money order, €5,000 from George Becker, a former town councillor now turned building materials tycoon, sent 3 months earlier. The old woman's hands trembled as she held the paper, recalling long ago gossip and how close Marcus had been to George. A vague, terrifying suspicion took shape. She found her daughter staring blankly in the kitchen. Ellie, this. Elena took the money order and glanced at it. There was no surprise on her face, only profound exhaustion and sorrow. Helena stumbled, grabbing the cold stove for support. The oven filled the air with the rich, cinnamon scent of apple pie, a smell that had once felt like the warmth holding their family together, but now only suffocated her. Yesterday, I baked a pie, put extra cinnamon in it. The old woman whispered, her voice breaking. But Lucas said, he didn't like it anymore. He used to eat 2 whole pieces. The last glimmer of hope died in her cloudy eyes. The 22-year that blood is thicker than water crumbled. She wrapped her arms tightly around her silently weeping daughter. We don't have to be afraid, Ellie. Mom's here. The key evidence arrived unexpectedly. Clara Schultz, Marcus's business partner and close friend, found Eleanor standing under the apartment building's porch on a rainy night, her shoulders soaked and her appearance disheveled. She thrust a USB drive into Eleanor's hand, her eyes darting away and her fingers cold and trembling. Marcus, he forced me to lie, said you cheated on him with Sebastian. I couldn't do it. This has his chat logs with Isabella. You'll understand when you see them. I'm sorry. She ran into the rain as if fleeing from something. Eleanor clutched the USB drive. It felt burning hot in her hand, as she stood on the porch listening to the downpour, like the sound of more lies shattering. The oak-paneled courtroom of the Vienna Regional Court exuded solemnity, filled with the mingled scents of old wood, paper, and disinfectant. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting dappled light, but it couldn't warm the coldness in the room. Eleanor sat in the plaintiff's seat, her back straight, wearing a dark grey suit with a prominent lavender brooch pinned to her collar. Her clasped hands betrayed her tension, her knuckles white. Behind her, she felt her mother's worried yet steady gaze, and Sebastian's calm support. In the defendant's seat, Marcus, pretending to be composed but with a crooked tie, Isabella, putting on a show of sniffling, and Lucas. She didn't look back, but she remembered the mud stains on his expensive sneakers when he walked in. Her lawyer stated the case clearly and submitted the evidence, the paternity report, the handwriting analysis, and a thick stack of receipts for 22 years of child support and education expenses, nearly €150,000. The demands were clear: revoke the gift of the apartment, recover the expenses, and claim €15,000 in emotional damages. The plaintiff gave enormous emotional and material sacrifices based on a colossal lie. What she seeks is not money, but truth, justice, and the return of what rightfully belongs to her family. The opposing lawyer challenged the validity of the paternity test, emphasized the emotional bond, and implied Eleanor was fabricating claims out of divorce resentment. When Marcus took the witness stand, he smoothed his suit collar and tried to sound suave, but his voice was hollow. Even if there's no blood relation, haven't we raised him for 22 years? Don't we have feelings? The child needs support for school, shouldn't she pay child support? A murmur rippled through the gallery. Eleanor's lawyer called a new witness. Clara Schultz stepped forward, her face pale, unable to meet Marcus's blazing eyes. She admitted to being coerced into fabricating evidence of Eleanor's infidelity, and presented the keychat logs in court, Marcus and Isabella plotting to hide Noah's true parentage and scheme for the family's assets. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The scratch of pen nibs stopped, leaving only the sound of held breaths and wind rustling the plane trees outside. As a witness, Sebastian submitted George Becker's bank statements, obtained legally, and a clarification statement to refute the slander. He spoke calmly and clearly, his eyes open and honest. His gaze met Eleanor's briefly, a wordless show of support. George's scandalous relationship with Isabella was fully exposed. The judge's expression grew grave. Helena didn't attend the trial, but her testimony, about finding the money order and her conversation with Lucas, was read by the lawyer. The mundane yet heart-wrenching detail of the apple pie echoed through the room. Yesterday I baked a pie with extra cinnamon, but Lucas said he didn't like it anymore. He used to eat 2 whole pieces. Through the lawyer's voice, the old woman's shattered dreams felt like a blow to everyone present. The truth lay bare like the Danube's riverbed after low tide, messy, cruel, and unvarnished. The verdict came down on a clear autumn afternoon. Most of Eleanor's claims were granted, the apartment gift was revoked, the property was redistributed, and the assets held in the children's names were recovered. The emotional damages award was reduced, but it carried great symbolic weight. Marcus and Isabella turned ashen. Lucas stared at the floor the entire time, picking at the seam of his pants. He never once looked at Eleanor, and never said, "I'm sorry." The crowd dispersed after the trial. Eleanor walked out of the courthouse alone. The crisp autumn sunlight fell on her, and for the first time in ages, she felt its warmth. Golden plane leaves carpeted the stone path, crunching softly under her feet. She made her way to the Danube. The river glinted with shards of golden light, carrying leaves, silt, and filth eastward. It had witnessed countless lies, truths, gatherings, and partings, yet it flowed on silently. 22 years of her life had been a dream. Did it hurt? Of course. The dull pain of uprooting, the emptiness of a collapsed faith. But amid the ruins, she felt not destruction, but an unprecedented lightness. The heavy, waterlogged cotton of pretense had finally been wrung dry. The scars would remain, but she no longer had to carry them. A figure approached quietly, holding out a steaming latte. Sebastian stood beside her, saying nothing, just watching the river with her. She took the paper cup, and the warmth from it chased away the last of the cold from her fingertips. She took a sip, the bitter richness of the coffee balanced perfectly with the cream. She turned to look at him, his profile soft and clear in the autumn sun. "Thank you," she said softly, the words holding more than gratitude. He turned and smiled, his eyes clear and warm. "Rivers always flow forward." She nodded, her gaze returning to the glittering water. "Yes, the river flows forward. Lies, betrayal, and pain would eventually settle at the bottom, washed away by the current. Life, like the river, would go on." She breathed in the crisp autumn air, tightening her grip on the warm cup. The future might be like the Danube, twisting, murky at times, but it would eventually flow towards something open and vast.